It was a Sunday afternoon in late September when everything came apart. The sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Jude's Catholic Church, spilling colors across the pews like scattered jewels. Outside, maple leaves drifted lazily down Main Street, coating the sidewalks of Cedar Ridge, Ohio, a town so small everyone still waved when passing by. Inside the church, the Davis family sat apart for the first time in years. Margaret sat near the front, her rosary twined tight around her fingers. Her husband, Paul, stood near the back doors, arms crossed, face clenched in stone. Between them emotionally, if not physically, was the ghost of their son, Michael. He had been gone for 3 months. A drunk driver, a Friday night, a two-lane road, and a text message that came 1 second too late. Michael had been 22, a volunteer youth minister, a guitarist at Mass, and a boy who still called his mom every night. The driver's name was Kevin Blake, and Kevin lived just 5 streets away. That fact was what turned Cedar Ridge into a pressure cooker. Whispers followed the DeVisas at the grocery store, at church, even at the parish picnic. Some told them to forgive. Others said forgiveness was for saints. But Paul, who had been a firefighter for 30 years, couldn't hear any of it. He burned from the inside out. After the trial, Kevin was sentenced to 4 years. To Paul, it might as well have been 4 minutes. Every night, he sat at the kitchen table staring at Michael's last photo, smiling in his graduation gown, and the bitterness carved lines deeper into his face. Margaret tried to pray beside him, lighting candles near the window where a small statue of the Blessed Mother stood. But Paul only muttered, "Don't talk to me about peace, Maggie." Peace died on Route 15. One evening, after Father Thomas stopped by for a pastoral visit, Margaret found Paul outside chopping wood long after sunset. She approached carefully, the rosary in her pocket. "Paul," she whispered, "you can't keep living like this." He didn't stop. "You think praying fixes everything?" "I think prayer changes us," she said. "Mary." He slammed the axe into the stump. Mary lost her son too, but she didn't have to live next door to the man who did it. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. She still forgave the ones who did. He looked at her then, eyes wild. "Then she's stronger than me." A few weeks later, Margaret began attending adoration on Tuesday evenings. The chapel was always quiet, lit only by flickering candles and the golden gleam of the monstrance. She sat there one night, trembling under the weight of loneliness, and whispered, "Mother Mary, what do I do? He's drowning in hate." The silence stretched long and heavy. Then perhaps it was her imagination. Perhaps grace something stirred in her heart. A gentle thought, clear as breath. Peace does not wait for justice to arrive. Peace begins when love refuses to die. She wept quietly for a long time. 2 weeks later, Margaret did something she didn't tell Paul. She wrote a letter to Kevin Blake in prison. Her hand shook as she began. "Kevin, I don't know what you believe about God anymore. I don't even know if you can forgive yourself. But I believe that my son would want me to tell you this. Hate cannot build anything. You took something precious from us, but I will not let you take my soul too. I pray for you every day." She mailed it before she could change her mind. When Paul found out months later because Kevin wrote back, exploded. "You what? You're talking to him? You wrote to the man who killed our son?" His voice shook the kitchen. Margaret tried to hand him the letter. "Paul, Please read it. She's sorry. He's been going to Bible study in prison. He says he prays for us every day. Paul tore the letter in half. Prayers don't bring back the dead. Then he stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The following winter, a blizzard hit Cedar Ridge. Paul was on call with the fire department when a truck lost control on the icy bridge and crashed into the river. He and his team raced through the snow, lights flashing blue across the frozen night. When they pulled the driver out, half conscious and bleeding, Paul froze. It was Kevin Blake, released early on probation. For a moment, everything went silent except the wind. The younger firefighter shouted, "Cap, we're losing him." Paul's gloved hands hovered over Kevin's chest. He could let go. He could walk away and nobody would know. Michael's face flashed in his mind, a smile. His laugh. The song he played at Christmas Mass. Then, just as suddenly, another image appeared, the face of the Blessed Mother at the foot of the cross. Her eyes full of pain but not hatred. Paul pressed his hands down and began CPR. By the time the ambulance arrived, Kevin was alive. Weeks later, Father Thomas asked Paul to visit Kevin in the hospital. Paul refused at first. But one evening, after sitting alone in the dark living room, he found himself walking down the corridor of St. Mary's Medical Center. Kevin looked up from his bed, bandaged and pale. "I didn't think you'd come," he whispered. Paul stood silent for a long moment. Then he said, "You know, I almost didn't." Kevin swallowed hard. "You saved my life. After what I did." Paul's jaw tightened. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because he gestured vaguely toward the window where a small statue of the Virgin stood on the sill, wouldn't have let me walk away." Kevin began to cry. "I'm sorry, Mr. Davis. I think about Michael every day." Paul looked down, his eyes shining. "I know you do. I'm trying to learn how to live without hating you for it." The following spring, Margaret convinced Paul to join her on a parish pilgrimage to the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C. He protested at first, but eventually agreed. As they stood before the massive mosaic of the Blessed Mother above the altar, Paul whispered, "I used to think faith was about being strong enough to survive loss. But maybe it's about being soft enough to forgive." Margaret smiled through tears. "That's what she teaches us, strength through gentleness." When they returned home, Paul finally went with her to adoration. For the first time in months, he knelt and said quietly, "Lord, help me forgive fully. Help me find peace again." A year later, the Devises received a letter from Kevin. He had been released on parole and was working at a Christian rehabilitation center, helping other men overcome addiction. "I don't deserve your mercy," he wrote, "but it's changed me. Your son's memory is the reason I try to live right. Thank you for saving my soul." Margaret read the letter aloud. When she finished, Paul closed his eyes and whispered, "Maybe peace isn't the absence of pain. Maybe it's what happens when we hand our pain to God." Every year after that, on the anniversary of Michael's death, Margaret and Paul lit a candle beneath the statue of the Blessed Mother at St. Jude's. And instead of praying for vengeance or justice, they prayed for peace. For Kevin, for themselves, and for every family still trapped in anger. As the flame flickered, Father Thomas once said during a homily, "Forgiveness is not weakness, it's the fire that melts chains." That night, Paul finally smiled again. For the first time since the accident, he felt something more than grief. He felt grace. If this story touched you, I invite you to reflect. In a world filled with violence and injustice, what does forgiveness really mean? Is it surrender the highest act of strength? Share your thoughts below. How do you believe peace can be restored in a heart broken by injustice? Let's talk about it together, because sometimes healing begins with listening.